You talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. So today on Keek on the Mic, I have a really interesting conversation for you guys, and I know I'm a little bit late on this because I was kind of contemplating if I even wanted to talk about this, but the report going around Chicago, and it's not even really a report, is that ESPN's Dan Orlovsky has been slamming not only Justin Fields, but some of the Bears' offensive weapons as well. And obviously, this is not to any surprise. There has been a lot of different opinions on Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense. Obviously, has been some good opinions and obviously some negative ones as well. And like I said, we've been talking about this a lot during the offseason as the Chicago Bears offense is going through some major transformational changes with new offensive coordinator Luke Getsy. And obviously, Justin Fields has a lot on his shoulders going into his second season as the Chicago Bears quarterback. And before I go into what Dan Orlovsky said, because this is what this episode of Keek on the Mic is all about, Dan Orlovsky. I just want you guys to know that I'm not mad. You know, usually I come on here and rant about these negative naysayers of Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense, defending Justin Fields, which I'm still going to defend him on this episode of Keek on the Mic, but I'm not going to, really be super angry about what Dan Orlovsky said. It's just opinions. We shouldn't let, opinions of people bother us, especially when it's coming from Dan Orlovsky, a guy that always goes back and forth on his opinions. But I just wanted to come on here and have a conversation with you guys and just listen to your guys' comments and see what you guys have to say about Dan Orlovsky's comments. But I just want to let you guys know that I'm absolutely not mad about what he had to say, because everyone has a right to their opinion, even if sometimes they are dumb. So here we go. On ESPN, Dan Orlovsky said that his expectations for Justin Fields are low and that he is in the worst position out of all of the second-year quarterbacks. Let's move on. He then followed by saying the Bears offense is a bottom 5 unit in the league. Okay, let's move on. Orlovsky then goes on to slam the Chicago Bears receivers by saying Fields doesn't have a number 1 or a number 2 wide receiver, and then he adds to that by saying Mooney is a good player, but he isn't a number 2 as of yet. And the whole Darnell Mooney thing came from Chicago Bears fans slamming Dan Orlovsky, saying, "Are you crazy? Darnell Mooney's definitely a number 2, blah, 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 blah." And then that's when Orlovsky followed up by saying Mooney is a good player, but he isn't a number 2 as of yet. Obviously, there's a lot to digest here, and this is a really good conversational piece. This is coming from a guy in Dan Orlovsky that he works for ESPN. He has bad takes all the time. We all know this. Most of the guys on ESPN have bad takes. They speak out of their ass. So most of the time, we just ignore this. But this is a good conversational piece because Dan Orlovsky didn't only slam Justin Fields, right? He then went after our offense and Darnell Mooney and our receivers, all that good stuff. So let's talk about this. Let's digest this. Let's start off with the whole Darnell Mooney is a good player, but he isn't a number 2 as of yet. I kind of disagree with that take. I really do. I do understand that the Chicago Bears currently don't have a number 1 wide receiver, and I've been saying this for a long time. I feel like that Darnell Mooney in a couple of years, maybe in a year or two actually, will possibly be the Chicago Bears' number 1 wide receiver. I feel that Ryan Poles and Luke Getsy have that confidence in Darnell Mooney to take that next step and become Justin Fields' number 1 wide receiver. And there's a lot of Bears fans that also have that confidence in Darnell Mooney. In 2 seasons, he has shown so much potential, especially where he came from as a 5th-round pick out of Tulane, and how he was able to develop under a terrible offensive scheme under Matt Nagy. And when I talk about Luke Getsy and what he's going to bring to the table and how he's going to help Justin Fields, that also goes for the other offensive players, like the offensive line, like Darnell Mooney. I also feel that Luke Getsy's scheme is going to help guys like Darnell Mooney take their game to the next level. Do I think he's a number one yet? As of now, no. Maybe after this season, I think Darnell Mooney can definitely be a number one wide receiver. Is he a guaranteed number two wide receiver in the NFL right now? Absolutely. And this is the first dumb take by Dan Orlovsky. I definitely feel that Darnell Mooney is a number two wide receiver. Obviously, if you guys haven't seen the tweet, he then followed up the tweet by listing number two wide receivers in the NFL, like Chris Godwin, Mike Williams, Tyler Lockett, Michael Gallup, listed all the players that are number two wide receivers, basically to back up his claim by saying that Darnell Mooney is nowhere in the vicinity or in the range of some of these number two wide receivers in the NFL. But when you look at Darnell Mooney's stats, only in his second season, compared to some of these guys' career years, Darnell Mooney is right on par with all of those guys' stats in year number two. Let me rephrase that. All these guys basically had career years, the best numbers in their careers, and they're in year 4 and 5. Darnell Mooney in his second season was right with their stats, only in year 2. So Darnell Mooney, in my opinion, you can disagree with this. You can follow Dan Orlovsky, but in my opinion, Darnell Mooney is definitely a number 2 wide receiver in the NFL, and he is on his way to being Justin Fields' top target probably in a couple of years, and I truly believe that. So let's move on. Obviously, another really, really bad take from Dan Orlovsky, and a bunch of bad takes he had to say about Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense was he feels like his expectations for Justin Fields are low. And Orlovsky may have those feelings, and he has a right to those feelings. That's his opinion. But the expectation for Justin Fields in Chicago going into year 2 is sky high. Obviously, we talked about this. Ryan Poles, all in. Luke Getsy is all in. He is excited about what Justin Fields is bringing to the table. He's excited what he's seen from Justin Fields so far. There is no reason to feel that the expectations are low in Chicago for Justin Fields, especially when you hear about what the coaches have to say about Justin Fields. I also don't think it's fair to say that who is better in a better situation or not, when he was basically saying that Justin Fields is in a really bad situation, in the worst situation compared to all the other rookie QBs. And the only reason why I say that is that just because teams like the Jacksonville Jaguars decided to overpay on talent, for example, like a guy like Christian Kirk, I feel like they overpaid for that receiver. That's a guy that is a number 2 wide receiver in the NFL, and they overpaid for him. Just because Ryan Poles decided not to overpay for his talent to build around his young quarterback doesn't really necessarily mean that Justin Fields is in a worse situation than a guy like Trevor Lawrence, like Zach Wilson. The Jets did it too. They went and just spent a whole bunch of money to build around their quarterback, which I understand. If you have the cap space, that's what you do. But just because the Bears didn't have the resources to do that, and they kind of just pieced together their team with guys that can come in and contribute and help Justin Fields succeed, doesn't put him in a worse situation than guys like Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. That's just my personal opinion. That's just me responding to Dan Orlovsky's comments on that certain take. But that's just how I feel about that situation. I don't think Justin Fields is in a worse situation than Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, all those other guys. I think Ryan Poles has done just enough going into this year. And of course, he's going to still continue to add to help Justin Fields. We talked about this before on the podcast. I don't think Ryan Poles is done adding to the roster, but I definitely think that Justin Fields is still in a very good spot to take that jump in year 2 as Chicago Bears starting quarterback. So I definitely disagree with that take as well from Dan Orlovsky. And another thing, in saying that the Bears offense is a bottom 5 unit in the NFL is also a very ridiculous take, for the simple fact that we haven't even taken one snap. You're basically saying that on paper, and that's basically what he's saying. It's on paper, before you take a snap, the Bears offense is bottom 5 in the NFL. Dan Orlovsky, can you predict the future? Like, for example, did you predict that you were going to step out of bounds and cause a safety when you were playing quarterback? And like I said, this is a guy in Dan Orlovsky that didn't really have a good NFL career, and he's always on ESPN just spitting out really, really bad takes. And like I said, the only reason why I came on here to talk about this is because he had multiple things to say. He had multiple opinions on Justin Fields and the Chicago Bears offense. But I think that was an absolutely ridiculous take because we haven't even played offense a snap. You could sit here and say that the Chicago Bears are going to be bottom 5 in the league. You could sit here and say the Chicago Bears are going to be top 5 in the league. But the truth be told, we haven't even taken one snap yet, so that's just really hard to predict what the Chicago Bears offense is going to look like, especially when you consider Luke Getsy bringing his scheme over, the new players that we added, and obviously, what is Justin Fields going to do in year 2 as the Chicago Bears starting quarterback in this new offense that fits his skill set? So it's a huge mystery. So Dan Orlovsky cannot predict the future. No one can predict the future. So I just think that is a really, really bad take by Dan Orlovsky. And obviously, when you think about Dan Orlovsky in terms of just looking at Justin Fields, he has never been consistent on his opinions on Justin Fields. For example, when Justin Fields was coming out of Ohio State in the 2021 NFL draft, when he was getting bashed about not being able to, in his progressions, taking too long in his progressions, he defended Justin Fields. Then when Justin Fields dipped in his draft stock, then he started bashing Justin Fields. Then Justin Fields showed some flashes in his rookie season. Then he was on the Justin Fields bandwagon. So basically, when I look at Dan Orlovsky in terms of his opinions on Justin Fields, when Justin Fields is doing good, he's on the Justin Fields bandwagon, much like a lot of people are. But when Justin Fields is doing bad, then he comes out and says this ridiculous takes on Justin Fields. So, like I said, one day he's defending him, one day he is bashing him. So, like I said, like I just mentioned in so many words, Dan Orlovsky only wants to support Fields and be part of the Justin Fields bandwagon when Justin Fields is doing good. So this is just my take. Like I said, it took me a while to come on here and talk about these comments. And obviously, like I said, I'm not upset. He has his right to his opinion. But when you really watch ESPN and these ESPN analysts make these takes, most of the time they are just speaking out of their ass just to get a rise out of people. And I could have easily come on here and just ranted for 30 minutes on Dan Orlovsky, but I just wanted to come on here and just have a quick conversation about what Dan Orlovsky had to say about not only Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, but the entirety of the Chicago Bears offense. So, like always, Bears fans, how do you guys feel about Dan Orlovsky's comments on Justin Fields, Darnell Mooney, and the Chicago Bears offense? Let me know down below in the comment section. Let's talk about it, and I can't wait to hear your responses. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Kick on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears podcast right here on Kick on the Mic. Thanks, guys. Him bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I